joining me for a review of some of the key political topics today. I'm very pleased to welcome James Heale, Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator, youngest political commentator as far as I can tell. James, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you, Nick. Not too bad.
Yeah, you're young and well-informed. I was the future once, but it was many decades ago. Good to have you. Listen, I really want to kick off, if I may, talking about Wes Streeting from two things. He's basically articulating, although we had Carl Turner on, the rebel Labour MP, when it comes to jury trials, saying he doesn't agree that Wes Streeting was setting out his stall to be leader. But Wes Streeting takes time out to go for a walk in a wood and tell us, or tell someone through the papers, that he thinks joining the customs union is a good idea. Well, on both counts, is the customs union joining it a good idea for Britain? And is this Wes Streeting setting out his stall to be leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister?
I think that it would be a very difficult step for the UK. It's you could, depending on where you stand or whether it be a good thing or not, is up to you. But I would make the point that if we did join the customs union, the Labour Party would have to give up those trade deals, which Rachel Reeves loves talking about, with India and the US. It would also take many, many years. And in terms of the UK, in some ways, we're irrelevant because I'm not sure the Europeans would let us back in. You know, you listen to what the continental sort of diplomats are saying, you read the press, and they're saying, hang on a sec, for 40 years, Britain was a half-in, half-out member. We then spent 4 or 5 years of their bandwidth obsessing about Brexit, and now we want to get back to with them.
But actually, James, isn't being in the customs union literally actually 1 foot in and 3 foot out, because you're a rule taker, you have to give up your trade deals, and actually you don't really, you might get more frictionless trade, but it's highly questionable how effective that would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, massively. And I think that's why the UK has lots of strong arguments against us going back in. But also, I'm just saying that the Europeans wouldn't want us necessarily to go in because they can see the polls. They can see that on current trends, Reform is set to be the next government. And I think they would be very sceptical about having us back in only to sort of pull out in a few years' time. So I think on the customs union point, I think it's very debatable. I think it's really just a sort of talking point for the Labour activists, and that leads to the second point, which is why Wes Streeting is floating this. Now, talking to members of the shadow cabinet, their big debate is whether this is just a rhetorical device, this pro-Europe talk, or whether actually Labour does want to get closer to Europe. I think it's a bit of both, but I think on the customs union point, it's more Wes Streeting going out there and flexing his muscles rather than actually sort of a realistic thing that the government's going to do next year.
I mean, I'm weirdly often quite impressed with Wes Streeting's ability to say things no one else really in the Labour Party will say. He does, I think, articulate really well. I think, and despite that, as a health secretary, it's far too early to say if his reforms are being successful, but he's failed completely when it comes to sorting out the doctors' strikes. Is Wes Streeting the answer to Labour's problems, and should he become the next leader?
Within Labour, there's a big divide. There are those who think their problems are about policy and those who think it's about comms. If you think it's a comms problem, Wes Streeting is probably your man. As you say there, Nick, he is the best communicator, in my opinion, in the cabinet. He is someone who is slick, funny, knows his lines, knows his brief. And I think that's why he's able to get away with that kind of cheeky chapping sort of persona that he's perfected in many, many years. So I think that he has got lots of allure and talent, but the question is, would the party go for it? And a bit like the Tories often go for a leader who's slightly right at the current one and the current centre, I think Labour would want someone who commercially is on the left slightly more than Keir Starmer.
So that's not a ringing endorsement that he would win it, but do you think, a final question on this point, that we are going to have a leadership challenge and probably a leadership change in the Labour Party? Can they defenestrate a leader as effectively as the Tories do?
No, they can't as effectively institutionally, but we've never seen a Labour Party come third in Wales. We've never seen a Labour Party come really sort of third in Scotland after the way they've been polling. We are in unprecedented times, so I think unprecedented measures, such as potentially a secret ballot, are definitely under consideration in the PLP, and I think it's 50-50 whether Keir Starmer makes it through this year or not.
Well, I will have to ask our listeners and viewers, do they think Wes Streeting is the answer to Labour's problems, if not the country's problems? They can join our conversation here, 03444 991 1000. Let's move on, if I may. I think it's all a bit weird, actually, this. So on the one hand, we have got the new head of the of the Equalities Commission basically saying, setting out a stall where she says, we shouldn't leave the European Convention on Human Rights. And by the way, stop demonising migrants because they're really good for the country. And the idea that you might speak up, and I'm paraphrasing here, and worry about social cohesion, worry about your safety, is actually not a good thing. In the same day, I'm reading there's an Albanian kingpin who is smuggling migrant crooks out of the UK in lorries for 2,500 people to help them avoid being put behind bars where they belong. I mean, it's a bit screwed up, but what is she playing at here? This is Starmer's appointment. Isn't he meant to be getting tough on immigration and illegal migrants?
Well, quite. And I think this is smacks of a general fighting the last war. This person's talking points are straight out of the book from 10 years ago, when we were in a very different place regarding migration, both legal and illegal. And it just strikes me that she is going to immediately come into office and have burnt any kind of goodwill with a lot of people who are sceptical of migration. I think that the tone struck by Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, was much better judge, saying migration can be a good thing, but it has to be done in a proportionate and legal way. And as you say, Nick, some of the stories coming out of the paper today and in recent weeks or so do point to the fact that actually migration, if done in the wrong way, a legal way, can be a threat to this country and to its people.
And maybe this this new chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, her name's Mary Ann Stevenson. Maybe it speaks to some of the frustration that we are led to believe the cabinet have with the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, because this is his appointment. She's completely off message when it comes to actually trying to back up what his own Home Secretary is trying to do. I mean, are there cabinet, you're in the know, are there cabinet ministers who are banging their head against the desk going, you know, will no one rid us of this fool of a Prime Minister who is just undermining us at every step? I mean, is it like that or not?
I would say two things, one of which is I haven't spoken to any ministers about this specific appointment, but this is emblematic of frustrations I have heard, which people saying to me, they just don't get it. The Whitehall blob, a lot of the people who've been around these appointments just do not get it and are currently acting like this is still 2011, 2012 rather than 2025, and the world's moved on. Second point, Keir Starmer, he does have a lot of blind spots. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is a gift for Nigel Farage and Reform, isn't it? When one of Starmer's appointments comes out and says these things, as you've brilliantly put, James, you know, that she's behind the curve. This is just Nigel Farage just points and see, they're not serious about stopping it in the Labour Party, and by the way, the Tories failed when they were in power. It's got to be a gift for him, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and this is what Farage is very good at, which is just saying he praises those who say the right things, saying Shabana Mahmood should join the Reform Party, etc. And then he waits for parties' internal contradictions to bog them down. And so talking a good game, but then he'll point to something like this and say, look, the true face of the Labour Party, this is what the person is actually in charge. And I think, Nick, you and I both know how important these triangles can be in terms of the kind of setting the playbook and rule book for government in the next few years.
Should there be a coalition? Should there and will there be a coalition between the Tories and Reform? All the polls are pointing to the fact that neither is going to form a government. Nigel Farage will probably be the largest party if polls are repeated as they are today. But the left could still outflank the right for power if the Tories and Reform don't agree, surely.
Yeah, in the short to medium term, I can't see any kind of pact or deal. I think both Kemi Badenoch in her leadership and Nigel Farage clearly are battling over momentum, want to come out of May larger parties. Get it close to the time, I could see echoes of 2019 playing back. That was when, of course, the Brexit Party stood down to make way for the Conservatives to stop Jeremy Corbyn.
And could they really do that again, James? Sorry to interrupt you, but could they do that? They're raw about that, aren't they?
Yeah.
Reform.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think that I think it's very unlikely. I think there could be some kind of messy compromise, maybe agreed, where you agree to focus resources or something like that. But if truth be told, Nick, I mean, those memories are long. And given how much Nigel Farage has talked about replacing the Conservative Party, I'm not exactly sure why he would withdraw the killer punch when he's got them on the ropes. So
let's just move to one final topic, which I think, again, well, it may be coming up to Christmas, but there's a plethora of important stuff out there. The Liberal Democrats have done something useful, which I find quite interesting. They've commissioned a survey that highlights the shoplifting epidemic. And it's looking like, and this is one of these weird statistics that have come up, more than 800 shoplifting offences a day are going unsolved and are closed without a suspect being identified, according to the figures. I mean, that is huge when it comes to the impact of this on society. I don't know about you, but I've seen it happening myself, and I suspect most people see an instance of shoplifting, or what they think may be shoplifting, happening. The Liberal Democrats' answer is they want mass CCTV rollout to give businesses the tools they want. Presumably they want us, the taxpayer, to pay for it. And presumably, I'd like to think somewhere in there might be some prosecutions. We're not getting to grips with it, are we?
No, we're not. And you may remember, Nick, in opposition, Labour made a huge fuss about this. They made a lot of kind of similar statistics. In government, it seems that it isn't something that hasn't been so much of a focus. And the tragedy is, I think, that a lot of this is kind of done on a very big scale, where sort of gangs are involved in targeting stuff. This isn't just people running out and nicking a loaf of bread. This is a much more wide, organised and systemic problem. I don't know what the right answer would be. You talk to people at the British Retail Consortium, they'll have a whole set of answers, but really it seems enforcement, not just identifying, but the enforcement of that law is going to be key.
I don't want to take you back, because you were probably, and I say this with tongue in cheek, you were probably still in school at the time, but back in 2012, you may remember, we had the riots. And I was, at the time, the MP for Enfield, which was one of the, it wasn't the worst hit, but it had a rough time, by all means. And people were nicking from the shops, anything from trainers to water. And we ended up with these overnight courts, because Cameron wanted to rush justice through, for justice to seem to be done. We ended up sending people to jail for nicking water and trainers. And they were sent to jail. And I went and met with retailers over a year later, I remember, and they were telling me, do you know, there's a real benefit to what happened, is that with those sentences that were handed out, shoplifting is down dramatically in our stores. Now, that was a temporary impact, but is it still old-fashioned to say, if we can sort the justice system, if you steal from someone, from independent traders or larger traders, where you are effectively stealing livelihood, that theft should bang you up, and guess what? People might not like to lose their freedom if they nick water. Is that too old-fashioned? Could I reasonably expect a government to come up with that idea?
I think a government very much could come up with an idea, but not in the current circumstances. They would point to the court's backlog. What I would say, Nick, is, of course, you remember under this government as well, when we had the Southport riots, suddenly it was late night sittings, it was justice served, over time. The state can respond in an emergency, but currently it's failing in far too many areas. And you're right, I think that, someone used to work in a shop myself, you need the law to be laid down and an example to make, because at the end of the day, it's those that's retailers who pay the price, and consumers in the form of higher prices too.
The thing is, I just feel that there's this resignation. I read there's resignation to levels of crime that have reached an extraordinary level. So I read this report about how many phones are swiped off people in London, particularly, and I now, and they were talking about, this is what you should do to avoid someone stealing your phone. Don't hold it in your hand. Don't walk next to the road. So I get it. And it's like, oh, hang on, okay, that's common sense. But guys, aren't you missing the point here, that these people are thieves and they are literally nicking phones every 8 minutes or something like that? Why have we as a society just tolerated this growth in crime where we're quite accepting of it?
I think it's absolutely frustrating. And, personally, I've had lots of friends who've had phones stolen and they can identify their phone. They've gone to the Met Police and said, look, my phone is in that building. Please just go knock it down. And then there have been occasions when the Met have investigated such cases and found there were sort of hundreds of phones in there. And it was done, again, on an industrial scale. And I think that is something that needs to be applied here, is that the broken windows theory about actually, if you do have a demonstrable appearance, then I think that actually that will help get some cracked down. Now,
didn't some New York mayor once do that? He said if you deal with the small stuff, you actually can change things, and he did. What was his name now? Was that Rudy Giuliano, I seem to recall?
Yep, and Bill de Blasio. Yep.
Bill de Blasio, yeah. Well, there you go. We can at least talk about him. James, lovely to talk to you again. Thanks very much for joining us here on Talk, covering the political grounds. I mean, we covered an awful lot there. I am genuinely interested in what you think about Wes Streeting taking his eye off the day job, and would he be the answer to the Labour Party's problems, because they're deeply unpopular, but would he be the answer to the country's problems? Because I'm pretty certain we're going to have a new Prime Minister in the next 12 months, and it ain't going to be one that you have voted for. And the Tories and Reform doing a deal. I think the ground has shifted. I think Tory members well, I think Tory members have always thought doing a deal is quite a good idea, to be honest, because they were in such a desperate state. It seemed a good idea. But Reform, have you moved on that? Do you think it would work? And do you trust the Tories and Reform to deliver the radical change that we need? And most people think that that change doesn't involve Labour, Conservatives, or even Liberal Democrats being back in power again. 03